Okay, 10 seconds, I think. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Russia Direct webcast. We have a wonderful crowd of experts today who will discuss the outcomes of Iran talks, which already passed last week, and the negotiators finally came to the interim agreement in Switzerland. So we have today here with us Mario Abu-Zaid, who is a research analyst at the Carnegie Middle East Center, who resides in Lebanon, Beirut. He works on political developments in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Hello, Mario, and welcome.
Thank you, Alexei. Hello, everyone.
Also have with us Associate Professor at the MGIMO University and Associate Professor of Chair of Middle Eastern Studies, Nikolai Surkov. Hello, Nikolai. Oh, he's probably reconnecting me. Okay, and we have Pyotr Topochkanov, who is Associate in the Carnegie Moscow Center's Non-Proliferation Program. He's joining us also from Moscow.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So basically, today we're going to discuss the outcomes of the Iran talks which were held in Switzerland. And after intense discussions, the parties were finally able to reach the interim agreement, which paves the road to the future talks, which hopefully will end up with the final comprehensive deal in June this year. And interestingly enough, that at the same time, very important changes happened in the region. To name a few, it's escalation of the conflict and advances of ISIS in Syria and Iraq, the intensified fighting in Iraq, especially in Tikrit, where Iranian forces were also taking part. And of course, the most recent one, it's the crisis in Yemen and the decision of the Arab League to form Arab Joint Forces and Saudi Arabia-led airstrikes in Yemen against Houthi rebels. And we also could observe within the last months sort of decreased role of Russia in Iran talks, and at the same time very intensified attempts of the United States to be the broker and moderator and the main initiator of the talks. So I would start with a question: what are the main outcomes for now of the Iranian talks? And Mario, please, we'll start with you. What do you see as the main outcomes of these talks?
Thank you, Alexei. Thank you, everyone. It is an honor to be among you all. The first thing that I could think about as a main outcome of what happened in Lausanne and the preliminary deal that's gonna be signed hopefully in June is that we have nowadays a more engaged Iran, and as soon as we have a more engaged Islamic Republic of Iran, things must change across the region. And all what the Iranian leadership was trying and seeking to do is to have some kind of a regional recognition where its role as an important regional power would be admitted by the international community, and by thus this will help the international community to better communicate with the Islamic Republic of Iran. However, it all depends on the behavior and level of commitment of the Iranian leadership towards this preliminary deal, because we have precedents where the Islamic Republic of Iran did not truly commit to former agreements made with the international community. So at this level, if the Iranian leadership would decide that this preliminary deal would be an opportunity for them to gain more power and more resources in order to improve their positions on the long term, and by thus continue after the end of the period of this preliminary deal to develop their nuclear arsenal and nuclear program, things will have to move in a very negative way. That is why we are hoping at the present time that this preliminary deal would be the right step in the right direction, rather than an opportunity for the different players to improve themselves, have more resources in order to improve their positions for the future.
Thank you. Peter, what is your intake on that?
First of all, I I totally agree with Mario that this is a great opportunity and a great success. But at the same time, the agreement is very fragile, and it's just the beginning of the long path toward full transparency and as well normalization of the relations between Iran and the Western countries, first of all the United States. I wouldn't focus on technical issues, but I would like just to emphasize that in interpretation of the agreement agreed in Europe, Western and Iranian experts and even official sources have different views. From the Iranian point of view, this agreement will allow Iran to have a heavy water reactor in operation. It will allow Iran to have Fordo as a research center. But if you read remarks published by US sources, there is mention that Iran will stop operating these facilities. So now, between now and June, it's very important for all members of the negotiations to sell this deal to the public and to the people, political forces in their countries. And of course, the most important issue is how to get public and government support in the United States and Iran. And this question will be very important regarding the achieving final decision in June. Thank you.
Okay, Nikolai, finally you able to connect to us. So what is the main outcome of the recent interim deal with Iran?
Well, from my point of view, the main importance of this interim deal is that it opens Iran for the international community, and Iran will be able to get rid of the sanctions. So the isolation of Iran, which was obviously in place, will end, and we'll have a new situation not only in the oil market, but also in the region as a whole.
And you touched on a very important issue, the oil price. So after the possibility, after the sanctions will be lifted, one argues that oil prices can come down. And for example, for Russia, it's not very good, and for Saudi Arabia as well, it's not very good. And we've heard that Saudi Arabia, together with Israel, were one of the most eager opponents of any deal with Iran. So how do you think this time until June can be used by all these forces, you know, opponents and proponents, and both Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Russia, and the United States, how they could play and what role they could play in this 3 months?
Well, of course, there are forces that might try to prevent the final deal from conclusion. But in that case, they'll have to use, first of all, this sanctions issue. Because for the Iranians, especially for the general public in Iran, the most important issue is the removal of the sanctions. So if somehow American politicians or Israeli politicians manage to press their governments, the governments in the US or the governments in Europe, if they manage to press these governments into change of schedule, then probably Iranians will try to renegotiate, and any kind of renegotiations will lead to a disaster in this case. But the oil price issue is I don't think it's the most important one. The most important things are political implications of this deal, not only for the region but for the world as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Mario, what do you have something to add on that?
I totally agree with your latest guest regarding the oil prices. I don't believe this is the most important issue to tackle at the present time, because most of the issues across the region are of political nature rather than economical one. Definitely, the sanctions have crippled the Iranian economy, and this is what have brought the Iranians to the table of the negotiations. However, at the present time, while we are signing the preliminary deal and hoping for an interim deal in June, things are shifting towards the political files, like discussing what's going to happen in Yemen, what's going to happen in Iraq, in Syria. This is why I was telling you since the beginning that this is an opportunity for the Islamic Republic of Iran to be more engaged with the international community as well as the Gulf countries in order to improve their relations and to discuss and negotiate about issues that are in the region from a peaceful manner rather than start being more inclusive on a military level. And we have seen how much the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is expanded across the region. And this is the first time in the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran that we see such a formidable military expansion in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, etc.
Okay. But a very interesting thing that today Saudi Arabia officially admitted that they acknowledge and they glad that the interim deal was finally reached. But just a week ago, they were really against that. Do you see there is some, I mean, how you can characterize that? I mean, apparently the crisis in Yemen affects a lot to this issue. As you already mentioned, it's sort of an extension of, I mean, some argues that it's an extension of this Sunni Shia rivalry and especially Iran-Saudi rivalry. So,
I believe
how it might affect this?
First of all, it all depended first at the kind of reply and reaction that the Islamic Republic of Iran had against the Saudi intervention in Yemen. If things evolved in a very negative way, where the Iranians would have been directly engaged in the conflict, things would have changed. However, because of the kind of reply that the Iranians have seen, and because they didn't want to cripple the nuclear negotiations, we saw how the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was more assured that Iran will be more engaged, and all kind of statements that were delivered by the U.S. administration, especially by the President Barack Obama, that they will make sure to guarantee the safety of the Arab countries and to provide them with defensive capabilities in order to prevent any further escalation. This is the needed assurance for the Gulf countries in order to ease the pressure on them from the part of this kind of nuclear negotiation, because most of the Gulf countries, and especially Saudi Arabia, was afraid that the United States will switch its alliances towards the Shiite group rather than committing to its strategic alliance with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as well as the other Gulf Sunnite countries across the region. So by just assuring them and by thus providing them with the needed capabilities and guarantees that this deal does not come on behalf of the alliances with Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as well as the Gulf countries, things would have changed. And there is why we may understand how the Saudi king as well as the Saudi officials are hoping to have an interim deal that would bring the Islamic Republic of Iran to the negotiations more and more, and to make it discuss issues from a peaceful manner rather than an interventionist one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Peter, I want to ask you the question about how you can see the Russian role in this process, in the Iranian talks in particular, and in those conflicting areas in the Middle East, like in Iraq and in Yemen in general. So, as we could observe that in the last months, Russian involvement in Iran talks decreased significantly. Even Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, left talks, and like he was going back and forth. So he didn't commit all his time as did John Kerry.
frankly, I would divide situation in the Middle East and the Russian position during the talks on the Iranian nuclear program.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe this is a key difference between Russian position on these talks and the position of the United States, because the United States wants to use these talks as a key channel of negotiating a lot of problems with Iran, not only nuclear program of Iran, but also Iraq, Syria, regional security, political relations between Iran and the United States. For Russia, nuclear talks with Iran, this is its key role is to resolve the nuclear program, the nuclear problem of Iran. So we don't want to put other problems into agenda. We want only to focus only on the problems relating to nuclear facilities, relations between Iran and IAEA, and we want to resolve all the issues raised by Security Council about Iran and its nuclear program, and that is why for us we used this opportunity in Europe to discuss all the issues relating to nuclear facilities of Iran and transparency of its program, but we didn't follow the path of the United States, which wants to discuss everything. And but at the same time, we have our separate discussions with Iran on problems in the Middle East. Of course, we don't want to have these discussions in Europe, for example, about Syria, because we have cooperation with Iran on Syria on trilateral level with Syria, Iran, and Russia. So there is no need, there is no reason to include this into nuclear talks in Europe.
So what you're saying is that Russia tries not to mix all issues and try to separate and concentrate only on one, instead of also drag Syria, Iraq, Yemen into the one pot, sort of. Nikolai, do you agree with that, or do you see it maybe in a different way?
Well, I mostly agree, but I have to add several points. First of all, Russia was the one who insisted on using this step-by-step approach to the settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue. And secondly, Russia was the force which stood for moderation. It did its best to moderate the position of the whole P5+1, because there were countries which insisted on much stronger pressure on Iran. Still, Russia was saying that what we already have is enough. So these were the points. Russia was always looking for a chance to find some kind of a compromise with Iran. So Russia's role in that respect was very important. Russia tried to make the conditions set by the P5+1 suitable for the Iranian party. So that was very important, and that was necessary to I think this is very important. Yes, that's my point.
Thank you, Nikolai. Mario, what is your vision on what is the role which Russia plays and might play probably in the future as a part of P5+1 negotiators, and as many in the West say, as one of the main backers of Iran, one of the main allies of Iran?
First of all, without the presence of the Russian Federation in those negotiations wouldn't have been initiated since the beginning, because there was a huge issue of mistrust between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the international community, which prevented them from sitting on one table in order to discuss anything. So without the role of the Russian Federation, at the first glance, those negotiations wouldn't have started since the beginning. And the approach of the Russian Federation towards the Iranian nuclear file was interesting since the beginning, because they were trying to adopt a peaceful manner and to bring the international community to agree on a peaceful approach to deal with the Iranian nuclear file, rather than moving further into threatening the Iranian leadership or bombing or trying to find out what could be possible in terms of destroying the Iranian nuclear project. Because the Russian Federation has a consistent commitment towards resolving this issue from a peaceful manner rather than from military level. On another level, the involvement of the Russian Federation across the Middle East has been important in the last year, whether by supporting weapons and supplies for several of their allies or by backing the Assad regime or the Iranians. So the alliances across the region are very much important. And that is why the role of the Russian Federation was also significant in terms of discussing what could happen across the region, because whether they like it or not, after the preliminary nuclear deal, things will shift towards negotiating more issues with Iran, especially regarding the Middle East, in issues like Iraq, like Syria, like Yemen, etc. And the role that the Russian Federation could play in those negotiations is very important, because it is already aligned with the Iranian leadership rather than opposing it. So this creates the needed balance in terms of the P5+1 and Iran that could enable such negotiations to have a hope into moving forward.
So, if I understood you correctly, you're suggesting that after this preliminary deal and hopefully the final deal, another issues like Syria, Iraq, and Yemen will come up to the spotlight. And how do you see those further elaborations, the further policies? I mean, that's quite clear that there is a fear that Iran can make the nuclear weapon, and then the balance of power in the region will be threatened, and Israel and Saudi Arabia would be involved in the arms race. But those sort of proxy wars in Syria, in Iraq, and in Yemen, how could you see the format of those negotiations? I mean, Saudi Arabia didn't request anything from United Nations Security Council. Neither did Yemeni president or foreign minister. So it's interesting how you're suggesting that the further issues would be discussed as Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, but in what format, in which way?
Alexei, regarding the Saudi intervention in Yemen, it was part of the threat that this coup d'etat could represent for the Saudi national security, and it's part of the Gulf security. That is why we saw for the first time such a direct intervention and such an formation of such a big Sunni alliance across the region. Practically, we saw two blocs that are being opposed across this conflict: the Shiite bloc and Sunni bloc. And for the first time, we are seeing that Pakistan is being part of those alliances, which is a guarantee for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia against any potential intervention from the part of the Iranians. But what I was talking about is that the more we have an engaged Iran, the more these things could be negotiated from a peaceful manner rather than intervening from military perspective or deploying military resources across the region in order to intensify the conflicts. So for the time being, the most important and the most dangerous file was the nuclear file. And if regarding the nuclear project, the international community was capable of sitting and negotiating with the Iranian leadership, how about the less important issues like what's happening across the region? Don't you think that they will be capable of sitting and discussing these issues more now that they have already discussed the nuclear project, which is the most dangerous one in terms of security threat across the region? That's one. Two, there is also the opposite side of this argument, which is the more time would pass, the more this preliminary deal would be implemented, the more sanctions will be decreased on the Iranian economy, and by thus, the more Iran will have more access to financial resources and tremendous resources that the Iranian leadership could use in terms of supporting and increasing its influence across the region. That is why, since the beginning, I was telling you that It all depends at the present time within this preliminary deal or the interim deal that could be potentially signed in June. It all depends on the behavior of the Iranian leadership. If the Iranian leadership is just gaining time in order to improve its position, have more access to resources, in order for, in the near future, to reinitiate its effort in terms of the nuclear negotiation and to have more influence across the region, this nuclear deal will reach no peace. However, if the Iranian leadership would be truthful in terms of its commitment towards this deal and would be ready to collaborate with the international community as well as with the regional forces, especially Turkey and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and try to discuss things and try to resolve the conflict across the Middle East, we will have a very bright future for the region where all regional powers and key players would be capable of sitting on one table and negotiating all these issues from a peaceful manner. However, if the Iranian leadership would decide that this is the time to have more access to resources, to rebuild its strength in order to face the Sunnite alliance in the near future, things will be very negative.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's good perspective. And Peter, I want to ask you, what possible consequences for Russia and the region do you see if the final deal with Iran will be reached ultimately?
First of all, I would like to say that still prospects for the final comprehensive deal are not so clear.
Mm-hmm.
And the questions relating to sanctions, transparency, about the cooperation of Iran with the IA, about all these questions, of course, will be very difficult to resolve. But also for the Iran after the nuclear deal will be very important to have relations with the West, and first of all the United States, to be stabilized, normalized. From this point of view, of course, there are a lot of questions, and for example, recently there were an article in New York Times, "Bomb Iran to Stop the Bomb," by John Bolton. This is a good example that in the United States there are a lot of people who are against any deal, any dialogue with Iran. So, as I said in the beginning of our conversation, the deal is extremely fragile, and the prospects for comprehensive agreement still unclear. But if this agreement achieved in June, of course, it will help to region and to Russia, and it will have a very good impact for stabilization in the region. But at the same time, I would say that regarding the situation in Iraq or in Yemen, still a situation will be very difficult and I would say dangerous, because this will be not related to the deal and nuclear program of Iran, not related to relations between Europe and Russia and Iran, but it will be related to competition between regional powers. First of all, Saudi Arabia and Iran. And I totally agree with Mario that Iran will have more resources after sanctions will be lifted. And from this point of view, if leadership of Iran decides to forward all these resources to regional policies in Middle East, supporting forces in Yemen, in Iraq, of course, the region will be destabilized more and more. And what interesting, situation in Yemen demonstrated very well that in this context, interests of Iran and Russia may differ from each other. For example, situation in Aden in Yemen demonstrated that groups openly supported by Iran may not regard Russian interests in this country and even target our facilities in this country. From this point of view, I'm still quite pessimistic about stability and security in the Middle East region, even after comprehensive agreement in June.
Yeah. So you're again suggesting that, on the other hand, you cannot solve one issue without not solving others. So it's kind of constellation that should be resolved not altogether simultaneously, but I mean, you should work on them hard constantly to reach the comprehensive deal, not only in Iran nuclear issue, but all over the region. Yeah, I see. And Nikolai, what is your take on that?
Well, I have two things in mind. First of all, one of the main concerns of the Saudi leadership is the Iranian nuclear program because of the Iranian potential to create nuclear arms. But if Iran proves really capable of following all its responsibilities, then probably tensions between Saudis and Iranians will be eased a little bit. On the other hand, there is this issue of Iranian internal policy, and successful deal with the West and the lifting of the sanctions might bring more liberal powers to the government, and that will also bring some kind of a that will also help to improve the situation and probably the relations with the West and with Saudi Arabia. But we have to wait to see what will be the outcome for the for the domestic situation in Iran. But still, I think mostly it is favorable, but it all depends on how the Iranians will follow the agreement. It is very important because there is a huge level of mistrust in the region, and everybody is afraid of the Iranian expansion of the well, the Saudis are talking about this Shia crescent which can be formed in the region. So without the change of policy, without the Iranians showing that now they are mostly preoccupied with their domestic issues and they're not looking for an expansion, then without this there can't be any real stability in the region. So we have to wait and see what will happen. But still, mostly this is favorable. This is favorable. It gives at least us a chance to solve the regional crisis.
And what do you see then? What is Russia's approach to all this policy in general, to this Sunni Shia confrontation in general? Like Russia sort of backs Iran at one point.
Syria, yes.
And on the other hand, it also backs Sunni regimes like Egyptian, for example, and tries to build some good relations with Gulf states as well, because their role in the region is increasing. So what is Russia's general approach to all this kind of more geopolitically speaking?
Well, Russia's approach is strictly pragmatic. Russia is looking. Russia wants to see stable Middle East. It isn't really interested in Shia domination or Sunni domination. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is to have stability and to fight the radical groups which are now feeling very comfortable, especially in Syria and Iraq. So this is the most important thing. And Russia is helping U.S. efforts and Saudi efforts to strengthen Egypt. It is logical because without Egypt, a region will be destabilized. On the other hand, Russia sees that without its help, its support, Syria might turn into something like Somalia. So Russia has to, well, it must have some involvement and feels it must provide help to the Assad regime. But still, the main purpose of Russia is to have a stable Middle East, which can be good economic partner, which can buy Russian weapons, which can provide hotels for Russian tourists, and Russia is very much afraid of the inflow of militants from the Middle East. So these are the points, and Russia is pragmatic. It doesn't really want to deal with only one party. It is ready to cooperate with everyone who in order to benefit the stability of the region. That is the main point, the main purpose of Russia's policy.
And I think one of the last questions. Don't you think, all of you, don't you think that this preliminary deal may serve as a sign, as an indication that things can be negotiated and can be done in the Middle East? That there is at least some hope for gathering actors in the Middle East all together, sit on the table, discuss, and come to some agreement. Don't you see this as a positive sign, or it's just a not fake, but just like one-time deal?
Well, Alexei, I'd say that this deal is an important and a positive step, but we'll have to see what will happen in Yemen. Yemen will be the real test of the Saudi and the Iranian ability to deal with each other, to compromise. So Yemen will be a test for the regional players in order whether they can compromise with each other. But
you're saying that Iran talks kind of will step back, sort of.
No, it's well. This deal is mostly between Iran and the West. Now, but in Yemen, we'll see whether regional players can compromise. This is a different thing. And you were asking about the regional players.
Thank you, Nikolai. And Mario, what do you think?
I believe it's a matter of interest. If the regional powers will have some kind of interest, then they will be capable of negotiating. Yet it is really premature to say that the nuclear deal will shed its light on all negotiations across the region and could be a very positive, could have a very positive effect on the regional and key players. Yet it is still premature. We are still negotiating the preliminary deal. We did not have access yet to the final agreement. What kind of clause would be included in such a deal? What are the commitments demanded from the Iranian leadership as well as from the international community, etc. So it is really premature to say that the nuclear deal is a successful one and could shed light on the region. However, there are two scenarios. As we said before, if things will develop in a positive way, where the Iranian leadership would decide to be more engaged across the region and to negotiate, whether with the international community or the local players across the Arab region and the Middle East, things will move positively. Yet, if the Iranian leadership would decide that this is the time to rebuild its strength, have more access to resources, and improve in the future in order to have to implement its former agenda in the near future, once it has its strength re-implemented, things will move negatively. And I don't agree that this is only about Yemen, and Yemen will be the major test. I believe that the very imminent test will be in Iraq and in Syria before Yemen, because already the inclusion and the involvement of the Saudi kingdom inside Yemen was very decisive. And we saw how the Iranian leadership did not engage in its full strength inside Yemen yet. So it's all about what is happening at the present time in terms, if we want to see that in case this nuclear negotiation would shed its light on regional player, we'll have to see what's going to happen in Iraq and in Syria, because in Iraq and in Syria, Iran is already being engaged on the ground in a very direct manner. So here we will witness and we will have some indicators to analyze the behavior of the Iranian leadership. In Yemen, I believe it's already being negotiated, and the involvement of the Saudis and the Sunni powers was very important and very eminent. And even we had some very initial statements from the Iranian leadership that this is now the time to negotiate in a peaceful manner, try to stop the bloodshed inside Yemen, etc. So these are the kinds of indicators we are looking at in the time being to see how much the Iranian leadership would be ready to negotiate with regional powers like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, like Turkey, in order to resolve issues in the
And Peter, suppose you have something to say, and that will be the final remark.
In the end, I would say that from the point of view of nuclear deal achieved recently in Europe with Iran, it creates a challenge not in the field of regional security first of all, but in the field of nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear security first of all, and then and it makes the situation of Israel less comfortable, because the idea of nuclear weapons-free zone, that by the nuclear problem of Iran and all the discussions relating to Iran, now will be discussed again and again, and all the questions from other countries will be asked directly to Israel, currently having a nuclear bomb. So from this point of view, the next difficult, of course, we will wait till June and till a comprehensive agreement, but then we will wait later for the ability of regional powers, including Iran, Israel, Egypt, and others, to negotiate a nuclear weapons-free zone in Middle East. If they will be able to do this, but of course there are a lot of problems on this path. So then we will be able to say that all the members of this region can negotiate very difficult questions and can find solutions of very tough problems.
Yes. Yes, as we all can see, everything in the Middle East is tightly interconnected. So every single issue is connected to another, and then it's like a huge snowball. So unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss everything in that the issue for the separate discussion. So thank you, gentlemen, for your participation. Appreciate your input, your insight into this topic, and thank you for your time. And I want to say, those who watch us, you can visit our website, russiadirect.org, for the further video footage of our webcast, and you can subscribe for free, russiadirect.org/archive. So thank you again, gentlemen, and have a good week.
Thank you, Alexei. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.